Coding an adjacency matrix. In general, when coding a graph, it comes with a major advantage. And that advantage is that, unlike with a linked list or a binary search tree, for example, we'll usually know all of the values and the size beforehand. That's because the applications that graphs are generally used for don't involve a lot of changes to the data. For example, if I'm creating a graph that's going to represent a map of a certain location, where each vertex corresponds to a location on that map, and the edge corresponds to the distance. Right now, generally, maps don't change. Yes, every once in a while, a new restaurant or school could get added, or a new tollway or a new road could get added, but those are few and far between, and thus it's generally safe to assume that the data that we're using won't change much, and thus use that fact to simplify the coding process. So, coding an adjacency matrix. We have our class graph. We want to use an adjacency matrix to represent the graph, so we're going to declare a two-dimensional array named matrix. And I'm going to make it a two-dimensional array of integers because I'm going to make each vertex correspond with an int value. And once again, we can do that beforehand because we're assuming that the data will not change much, if at all. Next, I'm going to declare an integer that'll store the number of vertices in this graph. Then in the constructor will receive one parameter, int n, and we'll use that parameter to initialize the matrix and the num vertices integer. Next, I'm going to add an add edge method, which will create an edge between two int values. And remember, these int values will correspond to the actual vertex, the actual location or data value. And it'll modify the matrix accordingly. And lastly, I'll add a print graph method that'll simply print out each row in the matrix, one row at a time. Now, how will I apply this to an actual graph? Suppose this is a visual depiction of the graph I want to code. The first thing you want to do is create a graph object, name it G1, and set it equal to a new graph, and pass the number 4 to it, because that's the number of vertices in this graph. All right. Then I'm going to use the add edge method to add edges to this program. And notice that in the sticky note below the graph, I have made each vertex correspond to a number. Once again, we can do that because we know all of the values, all of the data beforehand. So to add an edge, I'm going to call g1.addEdge 0, 1, which will create an edge between A and B. Then I'm going to call g1.addEdge 03, which will create an edge between A and D. Then I'll call g1.addEdge 02, which will create an edge between A and C. And then lastly, I'll call g1.addEdge 1, 3, which will create an edge between B and D. Then I'm going to use the print graph method to print out this matrix, which will produce this output.